You know, I was just sitting here thinking as our guests were talking, they were thinking they may sit, but if you guys want, she said she could stand too. So let's get started here today. Hello, welcome to the 10 Basic Financial Steps for Special Need Caregivers. My name is Eric Wright, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Today we have Kelly Piacenti, and Kelly is the head of Mass Mutual's Special Care Program for the United States of America. And with her today is Jerry Hulick, who is a special needs consultant for Mass Mutual. We're very honored to have them here today to talk about these 10 basic financial steps that we all need to be aware of. And so I want to thank you, Kelly and Jerry, for being here. And you have the audience.
Good. Well, you can barely see me over the podium because I have sneakers on, but I'm here. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. One of the things that Eric didn't tell you is that I was a special needs mom myself for 19 years. I cared for my son at home, who was total care and was nonverbal. So heading up this program for me is a lot of information that I went through as a caregiver myself, but hopefully you get a lot out of it today, and you'll hear me refer to my son Nicholas, who really inspired me to do a lot of this to help educate families. So we're really tight on time today, so you're lucky. I'm from Jersey. I speak really quickly, so we will be moving along. So the first slide is really, we're not going to provide you with legal or tax advice today, so this is our disclaimer. What's important to you as a caregiver? So as the caregiver of a person with special needs, we often struggle with what happens when we're not around. I know myself as a special needs mom, it was always difficult for me to think of who would care for him. And that was something that my family struggled with. A lot of families assume that a sibling is going to take over or somebody else is going to step into your shoes. It's not always the case. It's something that when we speak to caregivers across the country, we hear that when I'm no longer here, I don't really have someone. So we try to encourage families to think about what's going to happen when you're no longer around. So when you're planning for the future, a lot of families receive government benefits, but there are things that government benefits don't always cover. For instance, medical treatment. There's a lot of treatments that are covered by government benefits, but what about that doctor or that treatment that you get or have received that is not covered by Medicaid? What happens in that case? When we speak about education, there are a lot of programs across the country for all individuals with all different types of abilities. So years ago, education was completely out for our family, but now, over the age of 21, there are many programs that do accommodate all kinds of abilities. We also speak about skill development, what's paid for by the government, what's not paid for by the government, and what you were thinking. Many families have to employ someone for some type of skill development. Employment, if it's an option, there is availability for people with all abilities to have different types of jobs. We have employers across the country trying to employ people with disabilities, and it's not just people that are walking and speaking, it's all kinds of people. So employment is also an option for some of our families. Housing, which is very, very difficult these days. I know in the state of New Jersey and New York, the waiting lists were outrageous. And because I work across the country, I know as well that the waiting lists are not that great. So many of our families want to think about, well, what happens if I don't make it on a waiting list? Where is my son and my daughter going to live, and who are they going to live with? So we often tell families, when you're planning for the future, it's nice to depend upon government benefits, but we all know what's going on in Washington, that there's never a guarantee. And if it's something that's important to you, you need to try to think about what would happen. We have many families that want the individual to live in the house that they grew up in, or live with a sibling, or live with a family member. How do you do that? In what ways can you do that? When we speak about transportation or travel, think as a parent or a caregiver when someone's young, all the different things that you have to take them to, whether it's a day program, school, activities, social activities. what happens when you're not there, and who's able to take them, and how do you ensure that that's still going to happen? And social and recreational. This is something that when we plan for the future, it's one of the big ones for me. Up until the age of 21, it's an entitlement through the government. Our kids or our adult children receive a lot of benefits. But what happens after the age of 21? We all know that going home and not being surrounded by others with similar abilities or going to a program or doing something is really the worst case scenario. We work with families across the country that are aging caregivers that have a 30-year-old son or daughter living in the home with them without a lot of social or any type of recreational activities. And that's something that we try to tell families. It's something you need to plan for. You may have a caseworker or a social worker after the age of 21 or 22, but they sometimes give you a bucket of money and they ask you to figure out your own plan. So we try to encourage families to start thinking about it, work with local nonprofits, but think of the plan. What happens after 21? Because up till 21 or 22, it's not that difficult. It's difficult, but it's not as difficult as it could be after the age of 22.
I think, Kelly, a couple things to mention here. A lot of the legal instruments sometimes that you will hear are financial instruments. What we're really doing ultimately is planning for an overall lifestyle for the family as well as the child or children. And so when it comes to housing, as an example, the special needs trust is not to be used for housing purposes. But if you do, then there could be a cutback in SSI. And with special needs trusts, you're really trying to stay qualified for government benefits. The ABLE accounts that are now available today are allowed to be used for housing related issues. So we won't have time to get into a lot of the detail today. We'll be at the booth afterwards for some specific questions as well. But just know that there are many aspects around eligibility and the usage of the various different programs that are out there to make sure you're maximizing what you're doing. When it comes to the beneficiary issues, one of the things we're always usually concerned with initially is the means test. If we exceed the $2,000 for the means test. So that's why looking at all the various different assets and making sure they're planned in a way that nothing passes directly to the child or children that may get means tested benefits, public assistance benefits, and that's primarily the beneficiary arrangements around life insurance. It could be transfer of death on brokerage accounts or paid on death on savings accounts. All of these will go then direct the way it's directed, usually pointing specifically to a trust. We generally don't see trusts being funded until after the demise of the grantors or the parents in this case. So all of this needs to be looked at because all of it could count against the means test, and depending upon the situation, whether they're getting entitlement benefits, which we'll speak a little more about, or they're on public assistance benefits. Not to be confused. We'll have parents tell us all the time, my child's on Social Security when they're on SSI. Social Security administers SSI, but really Social Security is our entitlement programs that we're all paying into. So it's important to make sure you're looking at the transference options that are available to make sure it's kept clean and that the child or children do not receive those assets directly.
Right, because even if you have a term policy through your work, it goes automatically to your significant other, and then it goes to your children. If you have a child with special needs, they don't care. They're going to give it directly to them if something happens to you or your spouse, or you're a single parent. So you need to look at all the beneficiary designations because you can do all this great planning. You can get a special needs trust. You can have an ABLE account. But if you haven't reviewed the assets and the person that's going to need lifetime care receives one of these amounts, it could make them lose their government benefits, which is really what you want to prevent. You want to make sure that you look at everything. A piece of art, a piece of jewelry that has a value over $2,000, that could cause them to lose their government benefits. So it's really just being aware of what you have. I have families that say, I don't have any life insurance, I don't have anything, but then they have a term policy at work and something happens and it's left to their children. So you want to be aware of anything you have. A family meeting is something that we put in our 10 steps because believe it or not, it's extremely important. We have a lot of families that think the siblings want to take over. As in with my own son, I had said my son was very, very involved. I have 4 children. I automatically, did not want my other children to do what my husband and I did. But my children said, we're going to take over, we'll take him, we're going to take care of it. So we actually had to have a meeting to sit down and say, I love that you want to be involved in his life, but I don't want you to do the 24-hour care that me and my husband did. So it's having that family meeting, and if you're thinking about a sibling, have the discussion with them, because we get a lot of calls from siblings that say, Kelly, my parents left us in charge of my brother, and I love him, but I don't want to take care of him, or my spouse doesn't want to do this. But don't, take them completely out of the whole thing. You can say to them, well, maybe you can oversee the financial or the legal, or make sure that he's taken care of, or you go to visit him once a week. Just because the siblings don't want them to live with them doesn't mean they don't want them to be part of their life. But we try to encourage that discussion about future care needs. Everybody is, eager to help when someone's little, but when they get a little bit older and the care is much greater, it's difficult when someone thinks about, well, my daughter would have to quit her job or do another type of job because she wouldn't have the time to help take care of my son, or the services weren't in place. So it's definitely a conversation worth having, and we try to encourage our families.
And this is all about communication. And I think many times in families, people will kind of divide and conquer the various different aspects of what's taking place. And it's all a matter of communicating what's taking place. We could have a special workshop around just communication between spouses, because many times there's a lot of things going on that one spouse might not know what the other spouse is doing. The communication is critically important to get the best result.
So part of this is creating a team. And just, to Jerry's point too, we have an 86% divorce rate in the special needs community. Now it sounds kind of alarming, but it's a fact that we know that there's a lot of single parents doing what you all do. So we try to keep it in mind that you have to plan together, whether you're divorced or not. Hopefully, you both can agree upon the care or what's going to happen in the future. Because if one person does all the planning, does a special needs trust, gets everything taken care of, but the other person goes ahead and they leave the person money, it wipes out all the good planning. So the communication has to be there. We suggest that you create a team. Financial professionals, this isn't a plug for Mass Mutual. I don't sell any life insurance. I don't sell anything. But I do have over 500 advisors that 86% are like myself. They're a special needs parent or caregiver or sibling themselves, and they've had advanced training. And this training is called the ChSNC. It's not a Mass Mutual training. It's in the industry. And it's for any advisor that's working with special needs families. So we encourage you that if you're working with someone that tells you, I know how to do this, I know what's going on, try to see if they have that designation, because they should know about what our families go through with government benefits, special needs trust, some of the different types of planning that we do. Also, special needs attorneys, what I say to my families are, when you're getting a divorce, you don't go to a real estate attorney, it's the same deal. I come from a family of 4 attorneys. Nobody could draft my son's special needs trust because it's very unique and very different. There are attorneys that work for organizations like the Special Needs Alliance, the Academy for Special Needs Planners, NALA, Stetson. They have attorneys that specialize in this area. They do not work for Mass Mutual, but most of the families that I work with look to these resources to get a local attorney in your state that's done more than 1 or 2 trusts in a year. If an attorney, your family attorney, tells you, yeah, I can do this, it's no big deal, my next question is, how many special needs trusts have you done? It is very specific. It has to be drafted properly. It also has to be drafted in the state in which the person with the disability lives. So if you live in Florida, and your son or your adult daughter lives in another state, it has to be drafted in the state in which they live. So just make sure that when you're working with these attorneys that there's somebody that specializes in this area. We have accountants that we work with that are CPAs that also can give us deductions that a normal accountant wouldn't know that our families have taken on, or, for the dog. I was just going to tell them about the dog.
Go ahead.
There are deductions if you have a service dog. There is a deduction that you can take. I mean, that's something that a normal CPA is not going to tell our families. Health professionals, anyone that on that team can kind of step in or help a family member if you're not there. Guidance counselor or social workers can be part of the team. They sometimes know your child or adult child and can help. And religious or spiritual advisors, we have families that want a priest or a rabbi, somebody involved. Absolutely, this is really up to the family.
Keep in mind here that you're really creating resources for the family when you create the team, and you're creating resources for successor caregiving. So the more that people are involved in the process of coming up with the lifestyle issues that are going to affect going forward, easier to quantify the process, and then easier to show that those resources exist as caregivers change over time.
So you can get additional resources, obviously, you're at a nonprofit, but many of the nonprofits service all type of abilities and disabilities, so you can certainly go to them for services. I serve on the national board for United Cerebral Palsy. I was also on the national board for the ARC of the US for 8 years, and it wasn't because of my job, it was because I was an advocate for my own son. But I can tell you that they service all types of different disabilities, and they can help you, whether it's a sibling support group or an aging caregiver group or just local resources within your community. There's a lot of things that we pay for as families that could potentially be free through a local nonprofit. So you want to take a look at what you have around you. Support groups are good for all the family members, not just for the person with the disability, and we strongly encourage it. Government agencies, if you have not gone through the wonderful task of meeting with Social Security, or get ready, because it is definitely something that you're going to need to do if the person you're caring for needs lifetime care, and be prepared. We'll speak a little bit about that, but you certainly should know what's local to you. And the only good thing about the government agents, they will do a lot of meetings via Zoom, which they would never do before, and they would make us go there. My son, you could see the size of me, was in a wheelchair, was twice the size of me. They would make me drag him in there, even though he was nonverbal and wouldn't say anything to them, they still would make me bring him in there. So now they do a lot on Zoom, which I think is great for our families, but if you haven't met with them because you've been told there's no benefits there for you, it's a different ballgame at the age of 18. At the age of 18, regardless of where the person lives, if they live with their parents in a very nice house and the parents have a lot of assets, doesn't matter, because now the government looks at that person at the age of 18 as an independent person. So all of the benefits should change, and you should be eligible for much more. So a lot of families say, Kelly, I went when he was 16 or 15, they didn't give us anything. It changes when they're 18, just to let you know.
Well, and to that point, remember, there's 3 levels of government agencies. The federal benefits, what we see through public assistance type benefits like SSI or food stamps or these other things. We also have state benefits as well as county benefits, and they're not static. So even if you applied or went in at one time, there may be new programs because new programs are coming out. So if you made the connection, keep the connection up so you make sure you don't lose out on anything. Now, when it comes to the government benefits, there's 2 basic types of benefits. Our entitlement benefits that we're paying into to Social Security, it has 3 basic components: retirement, family benefits, and disability benefits. Any life event, meaning you make it to retirement, a premature death, or a disability, is going to kick off benefits. And so when you see on this slide, survivor benefits or the children's disability benefit, these are benefits many times missed. Good example for the children's disability benefit: if they're not able to make a substantial gainful wage and one of those life events happens with a parent, premature death, disability, or retirement, the child could qualify up to 50% of the parent's benefit, not taking anything away from the parent, up to 50% of that benefit while they're alive and 75% after they die. So if I'm getting a benefit of $2,000, my child might qualify for $1,000 as soon as I retire and after I pass $1,500. So That's something that's many times missed, just as survivor benefits are missed. So these are the ones we're paying into. These are the ones that come out of our paychecks, whether we're self-employed or working for somebody. The public assistance benefits many times are administered by the Social Security system, but are a separate program. So Medicaid, SSI, the food stamp programs, other assistance programs, many times even property assistance and housing assistance are going to come under public assistance situations. These are critical. We have too many people that bypass these as benefits that they're eligible for because, number one, maybe they think I really don't need them. At the same time, these are the benefits that are to benefit the child or children involved. So we should always go for the benefits that we're eligible for. Anything to add, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits that's also missed in addition to the child disability benefit is for an adult child, and that could be somebody that is not living with you. They could be in a group home, they could be in assisted living. They're still entitled to 50% while you're alive, and then the 75% when you pass. When you sit down with the government agencies or Social Security, they're not going to say, hey, you're retiring. This is a benefit for your disabled child. They don't do that. You actually have to go there prepared to discuss that with them. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is, when your child turns 18, you can technically charge them what they refer to as lodging. It's not rent, it is rent, but it's not. They call it lodging. So when a child turns 18, they could still be in school. You can go to Social Security and they can give you additional money for that person for lodging. You have to take the mortgage or the household expenses and divide them by the amount of people in the house over 18, but you are entitled to that. Now, some families say, well, I'm not going to take money from my child, I'm not going to charge them lodging. You could take that money and spend that on them any way you'd wish. You can put it towards your mortgage, you can put it towards the household bills, but it is something that you can go and apply for. But a lot of our families that take this on and they don't ask for anything from the government, these are things that you could technically receive if you're interested in receiving. It's really just having that conversation when you sit down with Social Security.
The current maximum for most states is $943 for SSI. So if you're not getting that amount, chances are that your state agency has cut you back because of not having a lodging agreement in place. We see it all the time across the country. So if you're at not at 943, then you need to be looking at what might have been missed as they reviewed what you're going to be eligible for.
Okay, in the legal structure and consideration, we talked about the ownership and the beneficiaries. Special needs trusts, they're not for everybody, but they certainly can help if you want to leave the person that you're caring for money, because clearly anything over $2,000 could be subject to losing the government benefits. We'll speak quickly about special needs trusts. Guardianship, conservatorship, it's not for everybody, but I can tell you in my case with my own son, I had to apply for guardianship at the age of 18. I was shocked when they told me that. Even, in my household, I said, he doesn't speak. I don't know how he could make his own decisions. They don't care. So at the age of 18 or prior to 18, around 17, you can start petitioning the court or you can work with an attorney if guardianship is an option for your family. Keep in mind, guardianship isn't all or nothing. It's taking away someone's rights. So if you just want guardianship over medical or you just want guardianship over financial, you can do that as well. But like I say, it's up to the family. It's not for everyone, but with many of the families that I work with that were similar to my son, the problem is it's not that my son would hurt anybody, it's others that prey upon them and take advantage of them. And if they're not conserved or you don't have guardianship over them, they are legally responsible for any bills that occur in their name. So you just want to be careful. You want to discuss it with an attorney if it's an option for you. Some of the other estate planning, last wills and testament. How many people in here have a will? Okay, every single person in this room has a will, whether you know it or not. And if you haven't drafted one with an attorney, your state has one for you, and your state does not care if you have a child with a disability, because if something happened to you and you don't have a spouse, they would leave everything to your children, and they would make that child or that adult child lose government benefits. So you want to make sure that if you do nothing else, you think about getting at least a will in place. Advanced medical directives are an option for our families, durable powers of attorney, and trusts, obviously. Letter of intent, let's see if I have time to speak about letter of intent. I'll talk about it in a minute.
Okay, well, when it comes to special needs trust, again, these are the major types, but the ones that you'll hear most about are a third-party trust, which is a trust set up for the benefit of the child by a grantor, typically parents. Then that money that goes into the trust, and there's no limit on the amount of money that can go into a trust, is protecting eligibility for government benefits. So that's a third party. In other words, a third party sets it up for the benefit of the child. First party, it's when it's their own money. We've had some discussions today. Child support, that would have to go into a first party trust because technically it's the child's own money. Basically an inheritance that comes directly or a settlement. And it first goes into a first party trust and it's set up for their benefit. First party trust, the biggest distinction is that has a Medicaid payback provision to pay back Medicaid for anything that might be in that trust. So that's going to be the first place you'd want to spend down benefits. And it's also where you don't want to necessarily add new money. So we many times will see people with both third and first party trusts depending upon where the source of the monies came from. Pooled trust is what we generally see as a part of the nonprofit sector, where they're also helping to administer it. They have both first party and third party. And then the Fairness Act allowed individuals that had the capacity to set up a trust for themselves. So all of this is really set up as a methodology to protect government benefits, protect the SSI or Medicaid benefits, and still have assets accumulating for the benefit of that child, and basically provide the lifestyle that's going to be necessary.
So what can it provide for? It can provide in a special need trust, either first party or third party, anything that's going to make the person's life better. It has to be a qualified disability expense. It's the same thing with an ABLE account, Achieving Better Life Expectancy account. It has to be for the benefit of the individual. With a special needs trust, you could put money in there because you want your adult child or your child to go on a trip every year. Well, it can pay for that person and a caregiver, but it can't pay for the whole family. It could pay to purchase a vehicle to take them around. Can it pay for a Corvette? Probably not, if there's a mobility issue there. It has to be realistic. Can it pay for a sensory room? Can it pay for orthotics? Can it pay for, things that are not covered by insurance? Absolutely, but it has to be for the benefit of the individual. And they are watched by the government. The big difference to keep in mind is a first party trust, you have to pay the government back if you got Medicaid. See, there you go. First party, you have to pay the government back upon the person's passing, but the government can only take what's in that first party trust. If they owe the government $1 million and there's only $5, the government gets $5 and that's the end of it. But with a third party trust, which is the ideal trust that's set up on behalf of the person, they could have millions of dollars in there, and when the person passes, that money goes back to the family. It doesn't matter how much they got from the government. The government cannot take any money from a third-party trust. So when we say first-party trusts are great if you had a settlement or child support, you don't want to add money to a first-party trust because it could be subject to a payback provision. So guardianship I already spoke about, so I'm just going to skip over it.
And today, again, we see many times today more limited guardianship, leaving rights in place, as many as possible, and protections built into it. So that's just something to consider as you get closer to the age of 18, 19 in some states, because at that point you could be disinvited to an IEP or you could be disinvited to a doctor's visit, depending upon the situation, and that's where it gives you the legal power to continue to transact. Have you identified a care provider? I mean, the biggest thing the families are dealing with is the succession of what's to take place. We talked about how critical the communication is. We talked about having a plan and capturing it. And we're talking about here at the letter of intent. That is one of the best places to capture what all the wishes and desires are. So Kelly, expand on that.
A letter of intent is not legally binding, but it's been used in the court of law. And you can come out to our table if you want a copy. We have paper copies, we have electronic copies. We don't have paper here, but we'll send them to you. And it's not something for Mass Mutual. If you don't have a will, if you have no vital documents, it's the one thing that I would strongly encourage you to think about filling out. What it is you could put it in a notebook. It's about all the likes, the dislikes of the person you're caring for. We learned during COVID how important these letters really were. I always had one. Mine was about this big. My son was on the ketogenic diet 3 times. He had physicians that were wonderful, that were life savings. He had physicians I wouldn't bring a dog to. He had treatments that were fabulous. He had treatments that did not work at all. He wanted his teeth brushed with warm water, not cold water. He wasn't able to tell anyone this. And even though I have a husband and he lived with me, there were plenty of things I did for my son that he had no clue about. So you can put your hopes, your wishes, your dreams. I want him to live in a group home. I never want him to live in a group home. I want him to live with his sister. I don't want him to live with his sister. Whatever it is that's unique, and if the person you're caring for can help you with that letter, have them draft it with you, but it's something you can put with your vital documents in your house. If you didn't hear in the accent, I'm not all from Jersey. I was actually born and raised in Massachusetts. In my son's letter of intent, the one thing that I had, and anyone that knows me will tell you this is true, is that I came from Boston. Don't ever take my kid to a Yankee game. And I had it in there because that was it. I mean, that's how I felt. And if he could speak, he'd probably say that. But all kidding aside, these have been used in a court of law for a judge to say, hey, this is what the family wanted. The mother was in a divorce situation. The dad was never part of it, or vice versa. They will look at this document. It's not going to take place of your will or the documents, but if you do nothing else and get nothing else out of this workshop today, please think about doing one, because I think it's important. And tell someone where it is. Having all the plans up here doesn't help if something happens. Certainly during COVID, we saw young people passing away that were caring for individuals that were really involved, and there was no plan. So please try to do a letter of intent if nothing else.
And for your successor caregiving, you're going to be a critical piece of communication going forward.
So this is just how to start the process. If you're interested, you should work with attorneys, financial professionals. The other thing that we really didn't have an opportunity to speak about today are ABLE accounts, achieving better life expectancy. The limits have gone up. The age limit is not going to go up for a few more years, but currently it's a great resource for our families. Some people are using it right now. Some people haven't considered it. You can certainly use it along with a special needs trust. There are things that you can do with ABLE that you cannot do with a special needs trust. An example would be a special needs trust cannot duplicate government benefits that you're getting for government benefits. So you can't pay for food and shelter out of a special needs trust. But what you can do is you can transfer money into an ABLE account and pay for food and shelter. So ABLE is another way for our families to save money. But keep in mind, with the exception of 13 states, ABLE does have a payback provision. So it's like a first-party trust in that way, that I wouldn't put tons of money in ABLE if you're in a payback state, because in the event the person passes, the money won't go back to the family. The money could potentially go back to the state. So you want to learn about ABLE. They're in every state. Ohio's got a great one, Pennsylvania. There's quite a few across the country, but ABLE is yet another tool for our families and was established by nonprofits to try to help our families. And it's like a $529 for a person with special needs. So it's something to consider. And I'm sorry we're like racing. We're pretty much out of time. But in summary, try to find professionals to assist you. Remember that the expert about your dependent is really you. And if you don't tell someone, there's no way that they can do this planning on their own. And think about lifetime care and quality of life. And you can really establish most of that through your documents. So thank you, and we're happy to take any questions if you have questions.
Yeah, we have, let's first give it up for Jerry.
Yeah, that was
and Kelly. Thank you.
very fast. We usually do this in an hour, each topic, so this was quick for us.
I first met her in Phoenix in 2017, and it was really helpful for me and my family. So any quick questions? I know I'm going to bring the microphone around. We've got about a minute.
I just want to know, I'm divorced, and Nathan I am his legal guardian. If his dad passes away, does he still get the SSI benefit from that?
He does. Yes, he does. He does.
Yes,
But
the
make
answer
sure
is yes.
too that you make sure that his dad, his documents, don't leave him anything outright. So that if you have a special needs trust, make sure that if anything's left to him, it's left to the special needs trust of. So that, but he will get the death benefit, yes.
Right.
As long as it's a biological relationship. Okay?
Over here. Question regarding special needs trust. For materials like the NOLO legal guide, if you use that and you yourself an attorney, would you think that's a good option to go? And if your answer is no, I'm curious why not?
Generally, those are not going to be as specific as we like to see in special needs trusts around particular situations. You got to make sure that the language is there to protect the government benefits. We see a lot of attorneys that don't work in this space on a regular basis, who we have to have the documents redone just because the language was not specific enough. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it might be, if you use that, still worth checking with an attorney for an hour consultation to make sure it's picked up everything that's absolutely necessary to qualify for government benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I was in my own house, my husband and my two older children are all attorneys, and they refused to draft it. They said, I don't really know about the specific language. We didn't want to make a mistake, because if you do make a mistake, that's a problem as well. So you just want to make sure that if you do that, that you have somebody look at it to say, it's good, everything's in there.
And what's at stake for a loss of benefits like SSI over a lifetime, or the childhood disability benefit over a lifetime, is substantial amounts of money. So we want to make sure the legal docs back it up appropriately.
And those documents should be reviewed, I'd say every 5 years. Some people say 8 to 10, but if you have a situation that changes, trustees go away, people you've listed are no longer there, but also there's been a lot of changes. When ABLE came out, things changed then, but you want to make sure that those documents are reviewed, I'd say around every 5 years. I have people that had trust drafted 15 years ago that have never had any changes done to them. You might want to take a look at them.
I know Anthony has his hand up over here. Was it okay if you all connect in the hallway? Perfect.
Right.
In the interest of time, we want to again thank our speakers today.
Thank you.
And I do know we have sessions that are going to be following here, and then another one over in the other thing. If you're interested in a quick mindfulness event, I'm going to be leading a session over there before we start with Ultragenics. And so please join me over there. I think there's some refreshments out, and so everybody, glad to see you all, and thank you again.